The sun beat down on the crowded alien marketplace, casting long shadows across the streets. People of all shapes and sizes bustled about, going from stall to stall, negotiating for food, supplies, and goods. Yet, despite the lively atmosphere, a strange stillness hung around one woman. She stood alone, her blue skin glowing faintly under the harsh sun, her long blonde hair falling in tangled waves around her face. Her bright, stunning features were marred by a deep sadness that reflected in her eyes. To anyone who looked closely, it was clear she wasn't like the others. Whispers filled the air as people turned to stare at her. They didn't hide their words or their sneers. "Damaged goods," one alien said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's been broken," another muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman didn't flinch. She stood there as the cruel words bounced off her, like stones against a wall. She had learned long ago not to react to their mockery, though it still stung. She wasn't sure how much more of this she could take. They called her damaged goods, because of the marks on her body, deep scars left behind from her past. No one knew the real story, the real reason for the scars, but that didn't matter. To them, it was enough to see the damage on her skin and assume the worst. She remembered the day it all started, how her life had been taken from her in an instant, leaving her with nothing but pain and broken memories. No one cared to ask the story behind her wounds. They just saw what was in front of them, and they rejected her for it. Her hands tightened into fists, her fingernails digging into the soft, blue skin of her palms. She tried to steady her breathing, to calm her racing heart. But the whispers grew louder, the insults sharper. She could hear them clearly now. "She's not worth anything," one said. "She'll never be anything." Another voice laughed cruelly. "Why would anyone want her? She's useless." Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them away quickly. She wasn't going to let them see her weakness. She had learned not to cry a long time ago. Crying wouldn't change anything. It never did. As the voices continued, a soft voice cut through the noise. "What's your name?" The question caught her off guard. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be spoken to without mockery in the tone. Slowly, she turned to face the source of the voice. A human stood before her. His eyes were kind, but filled with curiosity. He wasn't dressed like the others. His clothes were different, more rugged and worn, like someone who had seen the world. His gaze held no judgment, only genuine interest. "Why do they call you damaged goods?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her mouth went dry, and her throat tightened. She had never told anyone her story before. She had never trusted anyone enough to share the truth. But there was something about this man, something in his eyes, that made her feel as though he wouldn't judge her. She shook her head, trying to push the words away. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man seemed to sense her reluctance and didn't press her further. Instead, he looked around at the crowd, his expression hardening. "You don't deserve this," he muttered under his breath. Before she could respond, one of the aliens from the crowd called out, "Who do you think you are, human? She's nothing, just a broken piece of trash." The words stung, but the human didn't flinch. He looked back at the alien with a fire in his eyes. "She may be broken, but she's still a person," he said firmly, "and she deserves more than to be mocked like this." The marketplace fell silent at his words. The alien who had spoken, and a few others, stared at him in disbelief. No one had ever stood up for her like this before. No one had ever dared to challenge the cruelty she had faced every day. The woman's heart raced. Was he serious? Did he really believe what he said? Or was this just some act? It didn't make sense. No one cared about her. No one ever had. But something inside her began to stir. A flicker of hope. The man turned back to her and offered his hand. "Come with me," he said. "I'll help you, whatever it takes." For a moment, she couldn't move. She wanted to take his hand, to trust him. But the walls she had built around herself for so long held her back. She had learned not to trust anyone, not after everything that had happened. But the man didn't wait for her answer. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers, and spoke softly. "You don't have to stay here. You don't have to let them control your life." The crowd began to murmur again, but the human and the woman stood there, locked in a silent exchange. The weight of the words hung between them, heavy with possibility. The woman's mind raced. Could she really take this chance? Could she trust him? She looked down at his hand, her breath catching in her throat. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached out, just as their fingers touched. A voice from the back of the crowd called out, "You'll regret it." But she didn't care anymore. This moment felt different. This moment felt like the beginning of something new. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to stop being the damaged goods everyone else saw and become the person she was meant to be. The off of the marketplace was alive with the usual hustle and bustle. But for the woman and the human, the world around them had slowed down. The crowd, still murmuring, seemed to fade into the background. The only thing that mattered was the moment they were sharing this fragile, unexpected connection. The woman, still trembling from the touch of his hand, stood uncertain, her eyes locked onto the man's, searching for something she couldn't quite put into words. She had never trusted anyone before, not like this, not after all the hurt she had been through. But there was something different about him. His eyes were sincere, his words held weight. He didn't look at her like she was broken, like everyone else did. He saw something more, something worth saving. The crowd was growing restless again, whispering among themselves. They didn't understand what was happening, and they didn't like it. "What's this? Are you really helping her?" A voice from the crowd broke the silence, sharp and accusing. It was one of the market vendors who had been part of the group mocking her earlier. "She's nothing. She's damaged. You'll never get anything out of this." But the man didn't flinch. He stood his ground, facing the alien who had spoken. "She's worth more than you'll ever understand," he said quietly but firmly. The woman felt a wave of emotion rise inside her. The pain of all those years of mockery, of feeling worthless, was still fresh. But something about the way the man spoke was different. It made her want to believe. It made her want to take a step forward. "Why?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but he heard her. "Why would you help me?" The man took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "Because you deserve better," he said simply. "I don't care about your scars or your past. You don't deserve to be treated like this. No one does." She blinked, shocked by his words. In all her years, no one had ever said anything like that to her. Everyone had always just seen her as damaged goods, nothing more. But this man was different. He wasn't treating her like an object. He wasn't pitying her. He was offering her something more. Before she could respond, he continued, his voice steady. "I'll buy you all your debts. I'll pay for everything. You won't owe anyone anything." The words hung in the air between them. The woman's breath caught in her throat. This was unreal. He was offering to pay for her, to buy her freedom. She took a step back, her mind racing. "But I'm not for sale," she murmured, her voice shaking. "No one should be." The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was a smile of understanding, of empathy. I know, he said. "But right now, this is the only way I can help. No one should have the power to own you, to control you like this. I won't let them keep you here." For a long moment, she stared at him. The man was offering her something she had never dared to dream of: freedom. The freedom to leave the marketplace, to escape from the mockery, the cruelty. But there was a part of her that hesitated. Her past haunted her. The mistakes, the hurt, the scars she carried. Would leaving be enough? Would this man really be able to give her the life she longed for? Before she could think too much about it, the market vendor who had mocked her earlier sneered and spat. "On the ground, you think you can buy her freedom with a handful of credits," he said, shaking his head. "She's broken. She'll never be worth anything, no matter how much you pay." The crowd, sensing the tension rising, began to watch more intently. It was as if a line had been drawn in the sand. The human had made his offer, and the marketplace was divided. Some continued to mock her. Others were curious, and a few even looked as though they were beginning to feel sympathy for her. The woman felt a flicker of doubt. Could this man really make a difference? Was he truly offering to help her, or was this just another trick? She had been let down too many times to trust so easily, but then she remembered the look in his eyes, kindness that had drawn her in. She could see that he wasn't like the others. He wasn't here for anything but to help her, to offer her a chance at a new life. I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." "I don't need to know everything," he replied softly. "I just know that no one deserves to be treated like this. Not you, not anyone." The crowd grew quieter. The vendor who had been so vocal now seemed unsure, shifting his weight as if he realized he had overstepped. The other onlookers exchanged glances, some of them beginning to lower their heads in shame. The woman looked at the man's hand, still extended towards her, waiting. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if she was ready for what it meant to accept his offer. But she knew one thing for sure. For the first time in years, someone had seen her for who she really was, not for what she had been through. With a deep breath, she reached out and placed her hand in his. "I accept," she whispered, the weight of the decision settling in her chest. The man's face softened into a smile, and for the first time in a long time, the woman felt the smallest glimmer of hope. She was free, and as the crowd watched, they knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The secret revealed: the marketplace had fallen into an uneasy silence after the woman had accepted the human's offer. The crowd, once full of mockery and disdain, now watched with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The woman, still holding the man's hand, felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting to hide her pain. For the first time, someone actually cared. The human led her away from the center of the market, where the chatter had started to die down. His grip on her hand was gentle, but firm. As they moved through the crowded streets, the woman could feel the eyes of the people on her. But this time, they weren't mocking her. They were simply watching, wondering what would happen next. Her heart raced, a combination of excitement and fear. Could this really be happening? She had spent so long buried in shame, never imagining that anyone would want to help her, that someone would pay for her freedom. But here she was, with this human stranger, who had seen something in her that no one else had. They walked in silence for a while, leaving the chaos of the marketplace behind. The streets became quieter, more isolated. The man led her to a small, quiet building tucked away from the busy city center. It was a simple structure, nothing extravagant, but it felt safe. Inside, the room was modest, with little furniture except for a few chairs and a desk. The walls were bare, and the light came through a small window, casting soft shadows across the floor. The woman stood near the door, unsure of what to do next. The man, however, moved with purpose, pulling out a small device from his pocket. "Sit down," he said gently, motioning to one of the chairs. "You're safe here. I just need to make some arrangements." The woman hesitated, but then sank into the chair, her body suddenly feeling heavy. The man turned to face her, his expression serious yet kind. "Before we go any further, I think you need to tell me your story," he said softly, looking at her with concern in his eyes. "You don't have to share everything, but I need to understand what you've been through. Why they call you damaged goods." The woman felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. Her breath hitched, and for a moment it felt like the walls were closing in on her. She had spent so long keeping her past hidden, keeping the scars of her past buried deep inside. But something about the man's voice, the calmness, the patience made her want to open up. She had never felt safe enough to tell anyone before. With a shaky breath, she began to speak. "It was years ago," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was part of a group of explorers. We were searching for new worlds, new resources. I thought I had a purpose. I thought I was important." Her hands trembled as she clenched them together. "We landed on a planet that no one had explored before. It was beautiful, untouched. But there were ... things there. Things we didn't understand. Creatures. They were powerful, and they attacked us." Her voice broke, and for a moment she closed her eyes, trying to push back the memories that threatened to overwhelm her. The man didn't interrupt. He just waited, allowing her to continue at her own pace. "We fought back, but we were outnumbered. I was ... I was injured. Badly," she continued, her voice shaking. "They took me. I don't know how long I was there, but when they were done with me, I was ... different. They left me broken, scarred. But I survived. I didn't die." She paused, her hands pressed tightly against her legs, as if she could stop the trembling by sheer force of will. The memories were painful, but she knew she had to share them. She couldn't keep hiding forever. "After that ... I came back here, but no one saw me the same. They all looked at me like I was broken. A piece of damaged merchandise, nothing more. No one cared about the story behind the scars. They just saw the damage, and that's when they started calling me damaged goods." Her voice dropped to a whisper, and I believed them. I started to believe it too. She fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the room. She hadn't meant to say all of that, but somehow telling him felt different. He hadn't judged her. He hadn't looked away. The man didn't speak immediately. He stood there for a moment, processing her words, and then slowly sat down across from her. His expression was solemn, but there was no pity in his eyes-only understanding. "You're not damaged," he said quietly, his voice firm but gentle. "You're stronger than you know. What happened to you wasn't your fault. You survived. That's what matters." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But I'm not the same anymore. I'm not who I was." "You're still you," he said, his voice soft but confident. "You're still a person, with a past, yes, but also with a future. And that's what I see, a future. You're not broken, you're not worthless." The woman didn't know what to say. His words felt like a bomb on the wounds she had carried for so long. For the first time, she didn't feel like a mistake. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was defined by the scars that covered her body. Her heart felt lighter, though it was still heavy with the weight of everything she had been through. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let go of the past completely. But at that moment, for the first time, she felt like she had a chance to heal, a chance to live. The man stood up and walked over to the small window. He stared out for a moment, then turned back to her. "We'll figure this out," he said. "But you need to trust me. Trust that you can move forward, and I'll help you every step of the way." The woman nodded, her heart racing. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something new. The room had a quiet stillness to it, a peace that the woman had not known in years. But even as she tried to settle into this newfound calm, the unease in her chest would not leave. She had made the decision to trust him, to accept his offer of freedom, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it would not be as simple as it seemed. Nothing in her life ever had been. The man sat at the desk, typing away on his device. He was focused, his brows furrowed in concentration. The woman stood by the window, gazing out at the city. The marketplace she had left behind seemed like a distant memory now, though she could still hear the echoes of the mocking voices in her mind. "I've made arrangements," the man said, breaking the silence. "We need to leave here, but we can't stay in one place for too long. The people who control this market, people who control the lives of people like you, they won't just let you go that easily." She turned to him, confusion and fear rising. "What do you mean? If we've paid for my freedom, what else is there?" The man's face grew serious. He stood up, walking over to her. "Money won't change everything. Not in this world. There are powerful factions that don't like it when people step out of line. When someone like you is taken out of their control." The woman's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they?" "They're the ones who run the underground markets," he said, his tone grim. "They deal in everything from illegal trade to slavery. If they find out what's happened here, if they know you're no longer part of their system, they'll come after you." Her breath caught in her throat. The idea of being hunted, pursued by forces far beyond her control, filled her with fear. She had already been through so much. Could she handle it again? "So, what do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He met her gaze. "We have to leave, and we have to be careful. If we stay here, they'll find us, and they'll make an example of you. They might not even care if I'm with you. This is bigger than just us. We need to get to a safe place, and we need to do it fast." The woman's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The idea of running, of being pursued like prey, felt like a nightmare. But what choice did she have? She looked back at the man, his face calm but filled with determination. He had put his trust in her, and now she had to trust him. She had to believe that he would keep his promise, that he would help her escape this life. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "Let's go." They gathered what little belongings they had. The man grabbed his small device and a few supplies, while the woman picked up a small satchel that had once been hers before all this. It felt strange, like something from another life, but she knew she couldn't leave it behind. It was all she had left. They made their way through the building and out into the quiet street. The city stretched out before them, a vast, sprawling network of buildings and alleyways. It was the same world she had known her whole life, yet it now felt foreign. She had spent so many years hiding in plain sight, living in the shadows. Stepping into the unknown felt both terrifying and freeing. The man led her down a series of back alleys, his movements quick but purposeful. He was clearly experienced, knowing exactly where to go and how to avoid attention. They moved swiftly, avoiding the busy main roads and sticking to the narrow, less traveled paths. As they turned a corner, the woman's heart raced. She glanced around nervously, her senses heightened. She could hear the faint hum of the city's engines in the distance, but there was an unsettling quiet in the air. It felt like something was watching them, like eyes were on their every move. "Keep moving," the man said in a low voice, his tone sharp. "We can't afford to stop." She nodded, though her mind was spinning. She had no idea where they were going, or how they would escape. She was just following him, trusting that he had a plan. They reached a secluded part of the city, far from the busy center. Here, the buildings were old, decaying, and there were fewer people around. It was a place for those who had nowhere else to go, forgotten, abandoned, and in a way, she felt like she belonged here. The man stopped in front of a small, unmarked door. It blended into the wall, barely noticeable. He knocked twice, the sound echoing in the empty street. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passageway. "This is it," the man said. "We'll be safe here for now." The woman followed him inside, her heart pounding. She didn't know who lived here or what awaited them, but she had no choice. She had placed her trust in him, and now they had to survive together. The door shut behind them, and the darkness of the passage enveloped them as they descended into the shadows. The woman couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She didn't know who or what was out there, but she knew one thing for sure. The moment they stepped out into the light again, their lives would never be the same. The risk had begun, and there was no turning back. The escape plan, the air was thick with tension as the door to the hidden passageway closed behind them, sealing off the rest of the world. The woman stood in the dim light of the narrow hallway, her heart racing. The man moved ahead, his steps steady and confident, but she could sense the urgency in the way he held himself. They descended deeper into the shadows, the only sound their footsteps on the cold stone floor. The woman's thoughts were scattered, too many questions, too many unknowns, all swirling in her mind. What was she getting herself into? Was she really ready for this? Could she trust this man to protect her? But before she could spiral any further into doubt, he turned to face her. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've made arrangements to get us off this planet, but we can't stay here long. We've got maybe a day before they start looking for you." She nodded, barely able to breathe. The idea of being hunted again, of running for her life, was almost too much to process. But there was no going back now. This was the life she had chosen. The man, the stranger, had given her a chance, her only chance. She wasn't going to waste it. He led her through the winding corridor, taking sharp turns and avoiding any doors or windows that could expose them. They reached a small room near the end of the passageway, and he gestured for her to enter. Inside, there was a table with a few scattered devices, a map of the city, and a data pad glowing softly in the dim light. "Sit," he instructed, motioning to a chair. "We're going to have to plan our next move." The woman sank into the chair, trying to steady her breath. She couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her real or imagined. Her nerves were on edge, and the sense of being constantly watched made her skin crawl. But she did her best to focus on the task at hand. He quickly pulled up the map on the datapad and spread it out on the table. His fingers hovered over the screen as he marked a few locations with bright red circles. "We're going to need a transport ship," he said, pointing to a location marked as a black market port on the map. "It's a small, hidden spaceport, and I've arranged for a ship to pick us up there. But we can't walk in. We have to move under the radar." The woman studied the map, noting the distance from where they were and the routes that led to the spaceport. It was far, and the path was full of possible dangers. She glanced up at him, her voice trembling. "How are we supposed to get past all the guards? And what if they're already looking for me?" He sighed, looking at her with a mix of determination and reassurance. "I've got contacts. We'll move at night through the underground tunnels. It'll take longer, but it's safer. The fewer eyes on us, the better. And as for the guards, we'll find a way to deal with them when we get there." The woman's mind raced, but one thing stood out above the rest. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" she asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. He smiled, though there was no humor in his eyes. "I've had to. When you're living on the edge, you learn to plan for everything." She studied him for a moment, realizing just how much he had sacrificed for her, a stranger, someone he barely knew. In all her life, she had never met anyone like him. No one had ever cared enough to protect her, to fight for her. Yet here he was, doing just that. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now. "Let's do it. We'll get to the spaceport. We'll escape." He nodded, giving her a small, approving smile. But as he looked at her, his expression grew serious. "Again, there's one more thing you need to know. If we're caught, there's no turning back. The people who control this city, this market, they won't stop. They'll do everything they can to track us down. And once they have you, they won't let go." The woman's heart skipped a beat at the weight of his words. She had known the risks, of course, but hearing them put so bluntly made everything feel even more real, more dangerous. "What do you mean, everything? What will they do to me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "They don't just trade in goods. They deal in people, capturing, selling, using them as leverage for their own purposes. And you're more valuable to them than you realize. That's why they'll keep coming after you." The woman's stomach twisted at the thought. She could feel the weight of the man's words settling in her chest, heavy and suffocating. But there was no time to dwell on it. They had to keep moving. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice stronger now. The man pulled a small device from his bag of communicator. He turned it on and began to send a message to one of his contacts, giving brief instructions. As he typed, he looked over at her. "Tonight, when the sun sets, we'll make our move. We'll leave through the service tunnels, head towards the underground transit, and then get to the spaceport. The ship will be waiting for us." She nodded, feeling the weight of the plan settle in her bones. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be risks, so many risks, but she had no choice now. She had made the decision. She had to trust him, and she had to trust herself. "All right," she said, standing up and walking over to the map. "Let's get to it." The man's face softened, and for a moment, the harsh lines of determination gave way to a quiet understanding. "We'll make it," he said, his voice full of conviction. The woman nodded, Though doubt lingered in the back of her mind, there was no turning back now. The escape had begun, and their lives, both of them, were now on the line. Betrayal. The night fell quickly, draping the city in darkness. The once bustling streets were now quiet, the sound of distant engines humming softly in the background. The woman stood in the dim light of the hidden room, her heart pounding in her chest. The escape plan was set into motion, but even now, the weight of what they were about to do settled heavily on her shoulders. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The man had gone ahead to arrange the final details of their escape, leaving her behind to wait. She glanced around the small room, the walls closing in on her. The ticking clock, counting down the time until they had to leave, seemed louder than it should have been. Every shadow seemed darker tonight, every sound sharper. The woman couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that someone was watching them. She had tried to push it aside, to focus on the plan, but something deep in her gut told her that their path ahead wouldn't be as easy as it seemed. She turned toward the door as it creaked open, and the man stepped inside. He didn't seem surprised to see her looking at him, though there was something in his eyes that gave her pause. "It's time," he said, his voice calm but laced with urgency. "We've got to move." She nodded and grabbed her bag, following him as they made their way down the narrow passage once more. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as they moved through the maze of alleyways and tunnels. The city was still alive, but under the cover of night, everything felt different, more dangerous. As they reached the edge of the city's outskirts, the woman felt a sudden chill crawl up her spine. The transport ship should have been waiting for them by now. The plan had been foolproof, so why did she feel like something was off? "Where is the ship?" she asked, her voice tense with concern. The man paused, glancing around cautiously. "It should be right here," he muttered under his breath, stepping forward with caution. But as they neared the transport dock, the woman's heart sank. The small, hidden space, port once an isolated, quiet place, was now surrounded by dark figures. They moved with precision, as if they knew exactly where to stand, what to watch for. A sinking feeling in her stomach told her everything she needed to know. "It's a trap," she whispered, her voice shaking. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled her back into the shadows, his eyes scanning the area quickly. "Stay quiet," he hissed. "We can't let them know we're here." But it was too late. From the darkness, a voice called out, cold and unmistakable. Well, look who's decided to show up." The woman's blood ran cold as she turned to face the speaker. A figure stepped out from behind the shadows, his face hidden behind a mask, but his voice was all too familiar. It was the market vendor, the one who had mocked her, the one who had called her damaged goods. You sold me out," the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper, disbelief and anger flooding her veins. The man, her supposed ally, turned to face her, his expression hard and unreadable. "It wasn't supposed to go this way," he said, his voice low. "I didn't want you to find out like this." The betrayal hit her like a punch to the gut. He had been part of this all along. He had lied to her, led her to believe he was helping her, only to hand her over to the very people who had controlled her life for so long. "You used me," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "You knew what they would do to me. You knew." All along, the man didn't respond. He just stood there, eyes avoiding hers, as the vendor's men closed in on them, forming a circle around them. The woman took a step back, her heart racing. She had thought she had finally escaped, that she was finally free. But it had all been a lie. Take her, the vendor ordered coldly. She's worth more to us alive than dead. The woman's mind raced. She couldn't let them take her. Not after everything. Not after she had come so far. She had to fight. To find a way out. But her options were limited, and she had no weapons. No way to defend herself against the armed men around her. The man who had once promised her freedom now stood silently, his gaze downcast. The betrayal stung like a wound that wouldn't heal, but there was no time to dwell on it. She had to survive. As the men began to move toward her, she made a snap decision. Her only chance was to run. With a surge of adrenaline, she darted toward the nearest alley, her heart hammering in her chest. The men shouted behind her, but she didn't look back. She ran faster, pushing her body beyond its limits, knowing that this was the only chance she had left. But as she turned the corner, she heard the sharp crack of a gunshot. Pain exploded through her side, and she stumbled, crashing to the ground. The world around her blurred, and for a moment, all she could feel was the cold, wet ground beneath her. She looked up, her vision fading. Through the haze of pain, she saw the man who had betrayed her. He stood at the entrance of the alley, a gun in his hand. "You can't run forever," he said, his voice emotionless. "We'll find you." But before he could take another step, the woman's vision went black, and everything went silent. Betrayal had cut deep. But for the woman, the fight was far from over. Redemption, the world was silent, too silent. Her mind tried to make sense of what had just happened. The gunshot, the pain, but it was all fading, slipping away into darkness. For a moment, the woman wondered if this was it. Was this where her story ended? She wasn't sure how long she was out, but when her eyes fluttered open again, the first thing she saw was the night sky. The stars above twinkled softly, as if nothing had happened. The pain in her side was dull now, almost bearable. And when she tried to move, she realized she was no longer lying on the cold ground. She was somewhere else. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw a figure standing over her. A familiar face, though different from before. It was the man who had once betrayed her. But there was something different about him now. He wasn't holding a weapon. His face, once hardened by indifference, was filled with guilt and regret. "You're awake," he said quietly, his voice full of sorrow. I didn't mean for it to go this far." She tried to sit up, her body protesting the movement, but she ignored the pain. She stopped, her voice hoarse. "You shot me. You betrayed me." His eyes darkened, and he lowered his head. "I know. I didn't think it would end like this. They threatened me, my family. They made me do it. But I couldn't live with myself, knowing what I was doing to you." "Stop," she interrupted, her voice stronger now. "I don't want to hear excuses. I trusted you. I believed in you." He flinched at her words, but she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I'm sorry, I thought if I handed you over, I could protect everyone else. But I was wrong. You're not the one who's broken here. I am." She stared at him for a long moment, her heart still racing. The betrayal had cut deeper than any physical wound, but somewhere deep inside, she knew something else. She had a choice. She could hold on to the anger, let it control her, or she could use it as fuel to keep moving forward, to survive. "Get up," she said, her voice steady despite the anger that still burned inside her. "If you're really sorry, help me. We need to finish what we started." The man looked at her, confusion written all over his face. But how? We're out of options. The people after us, they're too powerful. Then we fight, she said, determination creeping into her voice. I won't be anyone's pawn anymore. I'm done being their damaged goods. And if you want redemption, you'll help me fight for my freedom, our freedom. He hesitated, his eyes flickering between guilt and resolve. Finally, he nodded. All right, what do we do? She stood slowly, her legs weak but firm beneath her. First, we find the ship. We finish what we started. I'm not running anymore. No more hiding. The man reached out to help her, but she shook her head. I can do this myself. Together, they made their way toward the black market port, the place where they had been betrayed only hours before. This time, the woman didn't feel fear. The gunshot wound in her side still stung, but it no longer controlled her. The betrayal had only made her stronger. She had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. As they approached the port, the woman felt a cold sense of determination settle in her chest. They were close. The spaceport was quieter now, the shadows hiding the dangers that lurked within. She could feel the eyes of the guards on her again, but this time she didn't flinch. She was done being afraid. We have one chance, she whispered to the man. If we're caught, we won't be, he said firmly. We'll make it. They crept through the back alleys of the port, avoiding the patrols as they moved toward the hidden docking area. The ship was waiting, just as promised, but there were still guards nearby. The woman's heart raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of knowing she was no longer a victim. She was in control of her own fate now. Ready? The man asked. Ready, she replied, her voice full of fire in a swift motion. She grabbed a piece of debris from the ground and threw it in the opposite direction, creating a distraction. As the guards turned to investigate, she and the man dashed toward the ship. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for them to slip inside unnoticed. They made it onto the ship, the woman's heart pounding in her chest as the door sealed behind them. The engines hummed to life, and the ship lifted off from the ground. The woman stood by the window, looking out at the planet below, watching as it became smaller and smaller. She had escaped. She had survived. But more than that, she had found something she hadn't even realized she'd lost: hope. The man stepped beside her, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he spoke. I won't ask for forgiveness, he said quietly, but I hope we can start over. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. We'll see, she said, her voice soft, but for now, we're free. That's enough. As the ship moved farther away from the planet, the woman felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, but she was no longer the woman who had been mocked, abandoned, and betrayed. She was stronger than that. She was a survivor, and this was only the beginning of her new life. Asterisk.